This Elna Star Series SU has a problem where it's not zigzagging, and there can be a couple of causes for this problem, but even you'll notice here, if I've put the stitch width on 4 there, you'll notice that there's no zigzag there. We've selected zigzag here, needle positions in the center. You'll also notice that the needle position is slightly out as well, it's not central. Now this problem can be caused by a broken gear in here in the Elnagraph unit, and a telltale sign is the fact that I can turn this here back and forward, and you'll notice also if I turn the machine over, at that point there it's not turning the Elnagraph cam. So if I engage that, I can make it pick up the teeth again. So what it's doing there is just engaged on the good teeth, and it'll get to the point where it'll get to the broken tooth and stop turning again, right there. So what's happened is one of the teeth has come off. I'll show you when I pull that out, but one of the teeth here is stripped on that gear in there, and that causes this to stop engaging with the other worm gear on the shaft. So I'll show you how to remove this here to get to it so you can replace this gear. One of the major causes of this problem is actually putting the machine into reverse whilst you're using the stretch type cams, the double cams. So if I install one of those and bring the stitch dial around to A there and width on maximum, this follower here, this cam follower here, is actually responsible for the reversing. So when it comes up onto a high spot on this cam here, it actually puts the machine into reverse. You can see that here. So sorry, other way around. High spot will be forward, and then low spot is reversing. Forward and reverse. But I suspect if you hold this reversing lever across and you're on and it's in the low spot, it'll let you do it because it's actually in reverse mode at the moment because this cam has put it there. But if you come across here, hold that and held that tight, stopped it. See, this is coming back to forward mode, so it's actually forcing this reverse lever back into forward mode, like that. I'm just lightly holding that lever, and then I'm just keeping pressure on it. See, it's heading back and forward. But if you held that tight and stopped that from returning, if you held that in there tight like that, and the machine's turning, this is trying to force the machine back into forward mode, but you're stopping it with the finger here, forcing it into reverse. It'll put a lot of pressure on this point here, and effectively what that'll do is it'll try and stop this from turning, the Elnagraph from turning. And if there's too much force there, something's going to give, and generally what it is it's the Elnagraph drive pinion gear will fail in exactly the way that I've shown it here. So never use reverse here when using the double Elnagraph discs. Any other disc, single is fine. Any double disc, don't use the reverse here at all, avoid it. And so when you're using double discs, you're using the A position here for the stretch type or pattern cams. It's a bit of a pity also that they didn't actually say in the manual not to use the reverse, or that, you know, it's dangerous to. Just a bit of a pity that it wasn't stated in the manual anywhere, not that the manual that I saw anyway. Maybe it was included in later manuals. But first of all, we'll take the lid off. Just the 2 screws there. That just lifts straight off there. And what we've got to do basically is we've got to take this top shaft right out. This shaft runs right along here to here. So we have to loosen this end here, and there's some other bits and pieces we need to loosen there as well. So I'll go through that. It's a metric. That is that's a 2mm grub screw. You don't need to take it right out, you can just loosen it until this turns, and that just turns like that, comes off. Take this little washer here off, and then the hand wheel should just pull off like that. A timing belt there, so that, you know, that comes off. So I can just retime that when I put the machine back together. But that basically, we take this belt off here. So that puts the that's going to put the machine right out of time between the top and bottom shaft. Might pay actually just to remove the needle also. And you can see there that that's nice and free there. Let me have a look here. You'll be able to see 4 screws there, 4 Cclip screws. There's also a screw. You can see one side of the screw there, so you can see one end of the screw. So that's the bottom end of the screw, and the other is at the opposite, but it's down inside one of those holes there. It's quite hard to see. It's down in here. Screw down in here. It's Grub Screw. Elna Grub Screw. So what we do is we loosen that. We don't take it right out. So that's quite tight. That's loosening there. So we just want to back that off. So here's a close-up of what you're actually doing here. So that's the hole with the Allen key section there, and if we do a 180 degree turn, we can see the back of the screw there. And so what you're doing when you're undoing that is you're backing the screw out. So I'm undoing that screw, it's receding towards the shaft there. And what you do is you undo this screw until you can't undo it anymore, because the screw is actually bigger than the hole. It won't come out, which is by design. So when you unscrew until it gets tight, you just then go 1 revolution back in, tighten, and that way you can move the worm gear off the shaft there, you see. And if I screw that back in, you'll see that the screw will come through the other side. Again, that's how it was locating. That's how it was locating the gear there. So just by unscrewing, if you go too far, the screw comes back out the other side, and that stops the gear from coming off, so that's when you just turn it so that it's flush again, and that way you can get the screw on. It's actually still a little bit proud there, just going a little bit more and it slips off. Now you might find that you might have to get a little bit of penetrating oil, or likes of CRC or WD-40. So if you've got the screw in the right position and this is not moving, just get a little bit of WD-40 or CRC, leave that to soak for a little bit, and then that'll make that a bit easier to move there. So I can slide that, I can now slide that gear, which means that the shaft will pull out from it, and then the other end of the shaft is held in with this grub screw here, this Allen key screw. So that the grub screw down in there is 2mm, this one's a 3mm. So this one will just, that's really tight. Definitely want to make sure you have good Allen keys for doing this. You don't want cheap Allen keys. They tend to burr over on the corners here, and if that happens it can damage the grub screw there. See, it's got a point locator on there. It locates into a tapered hole on the shaft there. Just so you can see what's going on here with the screw that you're taking out, it actually locates into a small hole here on the end of the shaft. So there's no need to keep track of the timing or anything. It can only go back in one position when you put it back together, so no problem there. So I'm holding that and turning the wheel on the shaft just to see if I can loosen it back anymore. I think something's holding it inside. I think it's sort of jammed in here, so I'm stopping this from turning, and I'm turning the wheel here and pulling towards me at the same time, and it's slowly coming, a bit of a jiggle. Through, that's it. And there we have the shaft out, and there's one of the teeth from one of the gears. That'll be the broken tooth. So these mesh in here like that, and what happens is it breaks one of the teeth off and just sits there spinning. I'll be able to show you the broken one. So next up we need to remove this C-clip here and the spring here, and also this screw here. So C-clip, just remove like so, just a screwdriver and twist, and one of the little gaps in the C-clip there. Just be careful with that and it doesn't fly away on you. Spring removal here. Just remove the spring like so, and then that should lift straight off like that. Being careful not to drop the there's a little dog that locates onto that there, that I've actually dropped down in there. I'll retrieve that. That little dog there sits on that shaft, so just be careful not to lose that there. And then we just want to remove that screw. That. There's a washer also, just be careful of that. A washer there, and that will separate these two plates here. One plate there separated with another one here, and that locates onto another little shaft underneath, which I'll show you when I get the Elnagraph unit out. But let's just put the screw back in here so we don't lose it, the screw in the washer, so that doesn't get lost. The screw here needs loosening, not completely unscrew, but just loosen. Yeah, so now I can move this further towards the front of the machine, and that gives you access down this hole here to get your screwdriver and to get one of these mounting screws out, which I'll show you in a second. Also remove the knob from the front here. That can be a little bit tight. There's a little cutout across the inside there that you can see that that there locates into there like that. When you're reassembling, there's a washer inside there, so just be careful not to lose that. And now what we have to do is remove 3 of the Elnagraph mounting screws. So one there's one here, and there's one down in here. So let's start with the harder one to get to, which is down in this area. So just get your screwdriver down, goes through the holes that you can see down in there. There's one screw there, so loosen that. One, another one at the back there, 2, and the last one, that one there. And that will release the Elnagraph mechanism. Now that should come out there now. So a bit of a jiggle. That's it. Sort of tilt it up at the back and give it a bit of a jiggle. It can be quite difficult because you'll see there's actually a locator. This here locates into that, so it's got to come up. It's got to come up and then tilt and out to allow this to come out the front of the machine here through the gap. And there we have the Elnagraph, and we've got the broken gear just here. You can see the teeth missing there. So it should look complete like that, but we've got a few teeth missing. And that, so this is the worm gear that we took out of the main shaft. Drives this Elnagraph gear here, so when the shaft is turning, it's turning the Elnagraph gear like that. Okay, but when it gets to this broken piece, it just stops driving, and that's why your zigzag stops, because it's no longer turning these cams here. Okay, so this here has to come out. This comes off the shaft, pulls off the shaft once we drive that pin there through, and we do that with a punch and a little hammer. It's a roll pin, and I'm just going to use I think that is a 2mm punch. So just the right size there, and a little lightweight hammer should be able to just punch that through. Starting to come through there now. See that coming through there now? So just carry on. And there's the little roll pin there. And now this broken gear will just come straight off. So there we have the broken gear and the good gear. That's what it should look like. That there, not with all its teeth broken. Now there are washers here on the underside, thrust washers. So I've got one there, and there are another here. So there's a total of 3. There's a couple of thrust washers and a little spring washer there, and that will release this whole shaft here. So probably quite a good time just to get a little bit of oil on there, lubricate that shaft up. And put the washers back on, line up the holes in the new gear there, like that, get the roll pin, I'd be careful when hammering this part in to not hammer down on the pin and then also hammer on these gears here. So I'll use a slightly bigger punch here, since we're not going through the hole. That pin's flush there now, so go back to the smaller one. We want to drive it through so the two ends are sort of evenly in there. That's looking pretty good there. So there we have the gear replaced. Sometimes you'll find that the needle positioning lever here also seizes, and you can unseize them when they're in the machine, but whilst I've got this out I might just get a little bit of oil into there. See, this shaft here comes through the casting bearing here, and they can seize up, so a little bit of oil just in here, get that freed up. That one's nice and free. Now it's time to put everything back together. This part here could probably do with a bit of oil as well. That's good. I'll oil that as well. What I can see here is this part that we took off the plate earlier actually will, when we're putting it back together, will sit over top of that little shaft there. So when you're selecting these here through the top cover, that's actually, when you're turning this, it's moving this little follower up and down. See that? And that little follower is making contact with the cams here. These cams, individual 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cams there. Okay, so that's ready to put back in. So I hope you find that part 1 video helpful. Keep an eye out for part 2, where I'll go through the assembly and adjustment of the machine. If you'd like to help support the channel, please go to patreon.com/sewingmachines. Thank you very much for watching, and please subscribe if you'd like to get notifications of upcoming videos. Thanks a lot.